Welcome to Murder Mile UK True Crime. This isn't a video, it's an audio experience. The only images you'll need for this episode are these. So close your eyes, open your mind, and savour the sounds of Murder Mile. How can a sadistic killing be both unsolved and some say solved? Find out on Murder Mile. Today, I'm standing on Woodfield Road in Ealing, W5. 4 streets north of the home of Alice Cross's killer. 5 streets west of the brutal murder of Penny Bell. 4 streets northwest of the penultimate attack by the beast. And 3 streets south of the custard-eating nonce. Coming soon to Murder Mile. In a leafy enclave of Ealing near Montpellier Park sits Stanley Court, a block of 32 brown-bricked self-contained flats built in the 1930s to cater for the West London bachelors. Back then, being fitted with a double bed, a modest kitchenette, and a soft sofa for savouring one's leisure time, the ambience wasn't sullied by the ear-shattering wail of ungrateful brats in need of a good slap, the fetid stench of soiled nappies, and every surface being spattered with all manner of body fluids and jam, as their sexless, broken, and eternally knackered parents count the years until they can finally get out, flee, or just get divorced. Oh yes, tell me how having a child is a magical experience, and when you've finished, tell your face. In 1988, with greater and necessary changes in equality laws, several professionals who lived at Stanley Court were women. Career girls who eschewed marriage and babies for the independence to plough a furrow as a high-flying executive with their own flat, car and future. One woman was 36-year-old Diana Mam, a recruitment consultant who'd done everything right in her life. She was well-liked, kind, popular, and she never made a single enemy. So why would someone want her dead? My name is Michael. I'm your tour guide. This is Murder Mile. Episode 332, The Ealing Crossbow Killer. Diana could be summed up by the platitudes her family and friends shared when told of her murder. It made no sense. She was liked by everyone. She was a lovely woman. Absolutely delightful. No one had a bad word to say about her. And this wasn't a facade, as it was exactly who she was. Diana Stafford Moore was born on the 2nd of August 1951 in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. Said to be a well-rounded girl who skillfully balanced every facet of her life. She was popular, sporty, caring and academic. She had no rough edges or abrasive tone. As for her, life was about living. Her passion for education, travel and success, as well as a bright personality, came from her parents. Married in the Scottish city of Dundee during the cataclysmic chaos of the Second World War, Diana was the only child of Sheila, a GP from the earthy industrial heartland of Blackburn in Lancashire, and Theodore Stafford, who she was named after, being a respected eye surgeon from Warwickshire. She was given a great start in life, but unlike many who felt that being pampered or privileged was their birthright, she never became self-centered or squandered it. Educated at Cheltenham College, a prestigious boarding school for girls, in 1969, aged 18, she won an exchange scholarship, and already having a thirst for travel, she spent the next year being educated in New York, which expanded her mind further to opportunities, but also the life of others, both rich and poor. In 1972, she graduated from Oxford Polytechnic with a higher national diploma in business studies. Aged 21, being career motivated, For 13 years she worked as a recruitment consultant for a wealth of high-end executive search agencies, gaining a reputation as a professional of the highest caliber. Until November 1986, when she became an executive at the Industrial Society at 3 Carlton House Terrace. Alistair Graham, the Society's director, said, "Diana was held in high regard by everyone." By her mid-30s, she was a high-flying executive on a wage of £25,000 a year, roughly £85,000 today. She had a sports car and her own flat in a desirable enclave in Ealing. It was the era of the yuppies, the young up-and-coming professionals, with their red braces, filofaxes, cocaine habits, mobile phones the size of bricks, and an arrogant belief, being the Wall Street mantra, that greed is good. But Diana wasn't part of this ilk. What grounded Diana was her faith. Both parents were Quakers, and as a frequent churchgoer, she embraced the same values of compassion, justice, and honesty, with a solid focus on helping others. Unlike the city boys, who lived a life of bragging, jet-setting, and getting STDs, Diana was a dedicated council member of the Shaftesbury Homes in Arethusa, one of Britain's oldest charities, helping the young and the unemployed, where Diana passionately wanted to encourage people working in the city to help those who didn't have their advantages. And when she wasn't striving to make the lives of those she didn't know better, she read books to the elderly at her local old people's home, Chestnut Lodge. As a strong and independent woman, she made the best of both worlds. An amazing job, a strong family, a good moral compass. She was financially stable, happy, and she had a good circle of friends. It made no sense that anyone would want to hurt her. So why did they? Said to be an all-round sportswoman, Diana was keen, but she wasn't competitive. She liked fell walking and tennis. She was a regular at Ealing Golf Club, playing weekly with her friend Anne to improve her 36 handicap. And she was an honorary Oxford Blue at lacrosse. But this was all for her health and her happiness. In her spare time, she liked playing bridge, going to the theatre, overseas travel, and choral singing, which aren't the kind of pastimes where you make a bitter rival and end up in a savage blood feud. So maybe it was jealousy, as her life was desirable, her car stylish, and her clothes fashionable. She was attractive, beloved, and lived in a luxury flat. It's possible, but we know she wasn't murdered for her money, as all of her estate of £181,000, roughly £500,000 today, went to her parents. In February 1988, 5 months before her death, she met Michael Stephens, a 37-year-old executive at a premium electronics company. Falling madly in love and being described as the perfect couple, by May, Diana had put her £130,000 house at Stanley Court up for sale, as had Michael with his flat. Their offer had been accepted on a £30,000 Victorian house in exclusive Mount Avenue, and she was waiting to exchange. Her life was good, she was happy, and it was about to get even better. Only someone was watching her. Stanley Court is a 4-storey apartment block just off Woodfield Road, a quiet residential street. Encircled by a U-shaped drive where parking is for residents only, it stands isolated, set away from the other buildings, and the only way to access the flats is via a communal door. 2 weeks prior, 2 of the flats had been burgled. So with Diana as the secretary of the management committee, to nip this in the bud, they had a security door fitted so the flats could only be accessed by an entry phone. Obviously, that didn't stop all of the crime. On Sunday the 12th of June 1988, just 5 weeks before her murder, the window of Diana's car was smashed and her briefcase stolen. Nothing of value was inside except for her filofax, so with it being more of an annoyance but easily replaceable, she thought nothing more of it. One evening, her phone rang, but the caller hung up before she answered it. It was probably just kids messing about, she thought. Days later, it happened again.
Hello?
But this time, the caller remained silent,
Hello?
listening to her voice become ever more panicked as she asked who it was and what they wanted,
Hello?
but heard nothing.
Hello? Hello?
Again, days later,
Hello?
the calls came through at odd hours of the night, waking her with a start, disturbing her with heavy breathing, and making her life a misery. As how could she sleep knowing that someone was out there trying to unsettle her? And then, when they did speak, twice they would threaten her, using her name.
I want you dead.
She told her friends, but never said who the caller was, if she knew them, or what they had said. If it was a prank, it was unfunny. If it was a prowler, why had they targeted her? If it was a robber, was it him who had stolen her filofax? But if it was, why hadn't they tried to extort money from her? And who would want to harm her anyway, as it was unlikely to be one of her ex-boyfriends, as she was on good terms with all of them. If their aim was to unnerve her, it worked, as every time she left her flat, she felt as if she was being watched. Whether shopping by herself, walking to her car, or going to the cinema or theatre with her boyfriend, Michael. On Sunday the 10th of July, just 10 days before her murder, she tried not to let it upset her as her parents were down from Sheffield. Unaware of her fear as she didn't want to worry them, they had a wonderful day out at the Royal Horticultural Gardens in Wisley in Surrey. They watched a performance of Aida, the tragic opera by Verdi at Earl's Court. And her mother Sheila later recalled, "Diana enjoyed it enormously. She was her normal, happy self. I spoke to her on the Saturday before, and she was as happy as she had ever been." By then, the anonymous calls had ceased, as had the supposed stalking. But now her killer would take a fatal step. Wednesday the 20th of July 1988 was a typical British summer's day, being cool and drizzly. Diana was due to give a seminar that morning, so that was what was on her mind. And at 8 a.m. sharp, she left flat 24 on the second floor. Dressed in a smart green suit and stockings, she placed her handbag and briefcase on the floor. And as she locked her door, she applied the final coat of lipstick, ready for the busy day ahead. Only she never made it to work. She never made it to her car. And she didn't even make it from her door. At 11:30 a.m., 3.5 hours later, 15-year-old Ali Farnan exited the neighbour's flat. And as anyone else would do, he didn't expect the worst, but something innocent. Ali stated, "I saw her lying on her side at the end of the corridor near the exit. I thought she had fainted. I could see that her face had gone a horrible grey colour. I was really scared, so I went to get my friend, as he thought she had fallen. There was bits of makeup scattered all around her, and she was still holding the lipstick in her hand. But when they returned, there was hardly any blood, just a tiny drop. I knew something was wrong. My friend said he thought she was dead, but I didn't believe it. We called the police straight away. I'll always be haunted by what I saw. Her lying there, with an arrow sticking out the side of her head." The investigation was headed up by Detective Superintendent Malcolm Hackett. The building was sealed off, the street was closed, house-to-house inquiries were conducted, officers with police dogs and metal detectors scoured the area, and forensics examined the scene. But there was not a single witness to her murder, to a murderer, and the murder weapon was never found. Her keys were by the body, but neither her flat nor her car had been accessed. Her briefcase lay beside her unopened, yet the scattered lipstick, purse and letters had clearly come from her missing handbag. Yet the most baffling aspect of the crime itself wasn't this pointless theft, but the method of her killing. Sticking out from behind her left ear was a 6-inch, aluminium shafted crossbow bolt. All that could be seen was the plastic flight. As able to travel 135 miles an hour, its steel tip had narrowly missed her skull and severed her spinal cord, buckling her legs from underneath her and killing her instantly. With no bruising, no scrapes, and no signs of any struggle, she'd been shot, robbed of an almost empty bag, and her killer fled. With the hallway window shut and no broken glass, the autopsy determined that Diana had been shot at close range, which made no sense, as a crossbow is used for shooting from a distance, not inches away. Ballistics determined that the weapon was a Barnett Trident handheld mini crossbow, like a pistol, as used by amateur hunters and sportsmen. It was small enough to hide in a bag or a jacket, and although its 75-pound draw-weight prod made it one of the most powerful handheld crossbows available, when used, it's almost silent. Police checked every seller in the UK, and although a lethal weapon, as shops weren't legally required to record who had bought what and when, with over 100,000 sold in the country every year, it was a fruitless task. Several theories were postulated as to who Diana's killer could have been. Every known burglar in the area was questioned, but with no signs of a break-in, that was ruled out. With a new security door fitted just weeks before, this could have limited the number of people who had access to Stanley Court, but it was deliberately left open from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. daily for the postmen, milkmen and builders. And with no doormen, witnesses, and being before CCTV was standard, anyone could have entered. And with the police describing her killing as a 1 in a million shot, some queried if this was the work of a professional assassin. Only Diana had no association with crime, and as Detective Malcolm Hackett later stated,
it was the kind of toy which someone would use for target practice. It's not the sort of weapon an intelligent man would use if he was planning a cold-blooded murder,
especially a hitman. Another theory the detective posed was
the crossbow was intended to threaten her, but discharged accidentally,
as it had a hair trigger.
We're also unable to say if the bolt was used to stab her.
As above everything else, it looked like a basic robbery. But for what, as no money was missing? 1 month later, Diana's handbag was found in bushes on a footpath between Mount Avenue and Montpellier Park, a third of a mile from the crime scene. But nothing of value had been taken. On Thursday the 8th of September 1988 at 9 p.m, an appeal was broadcast on BBC's Crime Watch, and an eyewitness came forward. The day before the murder, an unnamed ice cream vendor spotted
a slightly built, blonde young man
passing Stanley Court, carrying a mini crossbow in his leather jacket and a set of crossbow bolts in his hand. He was 19 to 21 years old, 5'8", and had cold, hard eyes. A photo fit was sent to all police boroughs, but who was he? Nobody knew. With no arrests or suspects, the coroner, Dr. John Barton, asked that the body be held at Ealing Hospital for 4 more weeks,
to give the killer a chance to come forward and say that it was an accident.
But as nobody did, Diana was buried in her family hometown of Auden, and with that, the case stalled. A memorial service was held on the 21st of June at St. Peter's Church in Ealing. The Diana Moore Commemoration Fund was established to provide unemployed young people with training, as was the most fitting way to remember. but her boyfriend Michael Stevens struggled to come to terms with her murder, recalling,
"I've almost given up hope that the killer will ever be brought to justice. If someone knew something, they would have come forward. More appeals just aren't going to help."
It was a motiveless crime on an unlikely victim by a sadistic culprit who remained anonymous. Likely, they were the same person who'd broken into her car, stolen a briefcase, stalked her, and terrorized her by phone. But none of that could ever be proven. Yet what baffled everyone the most was the reason. Diana Moore was lovely, kind, and caring. A woman madly in love who had no enemies or rivals. At least that's what it seemed, as someone had been watching her. Released in UK cinemas on the 15th of January 1988, Fatal Attraction, starring Michael Douglas and Glenn Close, introduced the world to the term bunny boiler, meaning a manipulative and vengeful ex-lover. Jane Frances Salveson was a 35-year-old design consultant from Brook Green near Hammersmith. Like Diana, they were both smart, driven, successful, and ambitious. But whereas Diana was caring and loving, who brought happiness to everyone, although tall, blonde, and attractive, plagued with self-doubt and regularly attending group psychotherapy sessions, Jane was said to be jealous, selfish, and possessive. In 1982, 6 years earlier, while on a sailing holiday in the Isle of Wight, she was introduced by a friend to a handsome business executive who had a £17,000 racing yacht called Sodium on Ealing Island. They fell in love, they became a couple, and they planned to marry and move in together. His name was Michael Stevens. In May 1988, Michael broke up with Jane and planned to move in with his new lover, Diana. Said to be depressive and grief-stricken after the breakup, anyone else would have let this go, but Jane couldn't. In court, her solicitor Brian Raymond stated,
"She behaved in what she described as an undignified manner, but it should not, however, have been interpreted in the horrendous, sinister way it was."
When questioned by police, having voluntarily submitted herself to be interviewed 4 times, giving up her fingerprints and allowing the search of her flat twice, admittedly months after the murder, she confessed to following the couple on dates to the cinema, but said she made no direct approaches. She also denied making the phone calls and breaking into Diana's car to steal a briefcase and Filofax.
Is anyone there? Hello?
Investigating her further, detectives found out that she'd posed as a buyer on several occasions to get into Diana's flat at Stanley Court weeks before the killing, as well as the house that Diana was buying with Michael. On Monday the 18th of July, just 2 days before the murder, Jane withdrew money from 2 cash machines, one of them being on Haymarket in Piccadilly. Perhaps for entirely innocent reasons, or as the detectives suspected, to conceal her purchase. That same day, a woman, described as blonde, slim and attractive, entered the London Trading Post sports shop at 52 Haymarket and brought a Barnett Trident mini crossbow with a £75 draw weight prod, identical to the murder weapon, and a set of 6-inch crossbow bolts. Staff remembered her as,
"Crossbows are almost exclusively bought by men."
The problem was, the suspect seen near Diana's flat with the crossbow was a man. Jane vehemently denied threatening, stealing from or killing Diana. And although a solicitor retorted,
"Her actions make her a sad woman. She's obsessive, but not a killer."
And yet the police were rightly suspicious. On Wednesday the 30th of November at Ealing Police Station, Jane took part in an ID parade of 9 similarly looking women in front of the 3 witnesses whose evidence could convict her. The sales assistant who sold the crossbow failed to pick her out, as did the store's cleaner, Yet the ice cream vendor who said he'd seen
a slightly built blonde young man with cold hard eyes
picked Jane out, having been asked by detectives about the man he'd seen.
Could it have been a woman?
At which he said,
Yeah.
Jane Salveson was arrested that day, even though the evidence against her was purely circumstantial, and 7 compelling witnesses stated that at the time of Diana's murder,
she was in a business meeting at the other end of town.
2 of whom gave their statements a month before the ID parade. On the 1st of December 1988, at Ealing Magistrates Court, Jane Salveson denied murder, with her solicitor stating,
she did follow her former boyfriend and his girlfriend, but she did not threaten violence against any of them. It's a shameful behaviour which she bitterly regrets now, brought about by the breakup.
Committed for trial, her bail was rejected as detectives felt she was unstable, suicidal,
and there may be a very real fear for the safety of her ex-boyfriend at her hands.
And being held on remand at Holloway Prison, her solicitor stated,
for Jane Salveson to be accused of murder is a terrible mistake.
Yet on Thursday the 21st of April 1989, all of that changed during a routine remand hearing. Claire Reggiuri, solicitor for the Crown Prosecution Service, admitted, due to the complexity of the investigation, the case was far from clear-cut. Therefore, on the evidence available, we cannot safely seek to convict Miss Salveson of murder. Jane wasn't in court at the time, but by the end of the 4-minute hearing, she'd been acquitted. Her solicitor, Brian Raymond, stated,
there had been a gaping hole in the prosecution's evidence, with the police becoming fixated on the idea that Miss Salveson was guilty. The real killer of Miss Moore is out there still. Miss Salveson was guilty of no more than being unlucky in love, and for that her life has been devastated.
Adding,
there was, though, at least one person with a more potent motive for wishing ill towards Miss Diana Moore.
Jane stated,
I'm immensely relieved that this ordeal is over and I can become a private person again. I never doubted that my innocence would be proven when all the facts were known.
But by this point, her life had been irrevocably damaged for arrest, which no compensation could rectify. With no trial, no further arrests and no other suspects, Jane was forced to quit her job, and her friends would later state,
the trauma of the 10-month inquiry left her a recluse and needing psychiatric care.
Since 1989, she has not given any interviews. As for the police, whose investigation had serious flaws, rather than the lead detective taking the full responsibility for this abject failure, an unnamed spokesman stated,
no decision on whether to continue the investigation has taken place, but if new evidence came to light, Miss Salveson could be charged.
Yet the true victims were Diana, whose brilliant life was cut short so tragically, her boyfriend Michael, whose future with her was taken, and Diana's grieving parents, who stated,
the tragedy is that our daughter is dead.
After almost 4 decades, the murder of Diana Moore remains unsolved. Only that isn't where the story ends. Having been branded a bunny boiler by the press, the Daily Mirror wrote,
jilted lover Jane Salveson denied being the prowler who has been haunting her ex-boyfriend
and his new girlfriend, Joanna. On the 20th of July 1989, 3 months after the acquittal, and on the 1-year anniversary of Diana's murder, an anonymous letter was sent to the press, giving them sordid details about Michael's life. 2 weeks later, his home in Battersea was burgled, a window was smashed, but nothing was stolen. 2 weeks after that, damage occurred to his new girlfriend's garden, and fearing that someone was out to do them harm, as they'd begun receiving threatening phone calls at night, they moved out. In the first week of August 1989, with that being Cowes Week, Michael's yacht called Sodium was burgled, and several personal items of his were stolen, including his camera, his keys, his checkbook, his sunglasses, and his diary. And then, in June 1990, when Michael and Joanna were on their honeymoon, a suspected arson attack badly damaged their new 3-story house in Fulham. A fire which, if they'd been in there, could have killed its occupants. Someone hated Michael, his new wife, his happy life, and they wanted them to be truly terrified. Jane Salveson was the primary suspect, with all 3 cases brought to trial. But again, on the charge of arson and burglary of his home, the CPS dropped the case owing to a lack of evidence. As for the burglary of the yacht, although his personal possessions were found in Jane's flat, she said that the diary, the keys, the sunglasses and the checkbook all came into her possession when we exchanged property after our relationship ended, and that a mystery man had tried to frame her by selling her his stolen camera. And yet again, she said that she couldn't have committed the yacht's burglary, as several friends confirmed she was with them at the time. Acquitted of all charges, Jane Salveson was released and hasn't been publicly heard of since. In court, her lawyer claimed,
She's felt victimized by the police and their incessant involvement in every aspect of her life. This is a case that was unlikely to have been investigated with the vigor that it was, and she feels bitter that she has borne the brunt of a very powerful and resourceful prosecution team.
and that is where the story truly ends. A sadistic killing, which some say is unsolved, and yet solved. So who murdered Diana Moore? Was it the jealous and possessive ex-girlfriend of her husband-to-be? Or a mysterious, unnamed stranger?